War and decolonization. But I'm starting out a little bit because I have to do a little disclaimer, is that there's going to be times where there's going to be a little bit of a jump or a startle. And the reason why is I'm trying to show you how imminent and scary the Cold War was for those living in it. As we live in a world with coronavirus and looking about how we worry about each other being infected, in the Cold War, people didn't really worry about each other unless they were spies. They were more concerned about the big bad menace somewhere else across an ocean. But they also realized that a nuclear bomb could come at any moment, and that all of what they know could be completely wiped out in a matter of an hour's warning. So with that, I want to make sure that you guys see this and have this warning that there might be a little bit of scares or quick shifts or stuff we're just not ready about. And that's just, oh my gosh, what's out there?
Diddle-dum-dum, diddle-dum-dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He'd duck and cover, duck and cover.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you
and you, duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association. Produced by Archer Productions, Incorporated. Hey, Bert, come on out and meet all these nice people, please. Oh, all right. We really can't blame you. You see, Bert is a very, very careful fellow. When there's danger, this is the way he keeps from being hurt. Sometimes it even saves his life. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school. We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it, just as we are ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time. Fire is a danger. It can burn whole buildings if someone is careless. But we are ready for fires. We have a fine fire department to put out the fire, and you have fire drills in your school so you know what to do. Automobiles can be dangerous too. They sometimes cause bad accidents, but we are ready. We have safety rules that car drivers and people who are walking must obey. Now, we must be ready for a new danger, the atomic bomb. First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes. You will know when it comes. We hope it never comes, but we must get ready. It looks something like this. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. If you are not ready and did not know what to do, it could hurt you in different ways. It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It is such a big explosion, it can smash in buildings and knock signboards over and break windows all over town. But if you duck and cover like Bert, you will be much safer. You know how bad sunburn can feel. The atomic bomb flash could burn you worse than a terrible sunburn, especially where you're not covered. Now, you and I don't have shells to crawl into like Bert the Turtle, so we have to cover up in our own way. First, you duck, and then you cover. And very tightly, you cover the back of your neck and your face. Duck and cover underneath a table or desk or anything else close by. In Betty's school, they are talking about the atomic bomb, too. Betty is asking her teacher, how can we tell when the atomic bomb may explode? and her teacher is explaining that there are two kinds of attack, with warning and without any warning. We think that most of the time we will be warned before the bomb explodes, so there will be time for us to get into our homes, schools, or some other safe place. Our civil defense workers and our men in uniform will do everything they can to warn us before enemy planes can bring a bomb near us. You may be in your schoolyard playing when the signal comes. That signal means to stop whatever you are doing and get to the nearest safe place fast. Always remember, the flash of an atomic bomb can come at any time, no matter where you may be. You might be out playing at home when the warning comes. Then be sure to get into the house fast, where your parents have fixed a safe place for you to go. The bomb might explode when there are no grown-ups near. Paul and Patty know this, and they're always ready to take care of themselves. Here they are on their way to school on a beautiful spring day. But no matter where they go or what they do, they always try to remember what to do if the atom bomb explodes right then. It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Paul and Patty know what to do. Paul covered the back of his head so that he wouldn't be burned, and Patty covered herself with the coat she was carrying. They knew how to duck and cover. They acted right away when the flash came. If they had been at this doorway when the bomb flashed, Paul and Patty would have ducked and covered this way, like this girl. Heavy doorways are a good place to duck and cover. She will be safer, too. Here's Tony going to his Cub Scout meeting. Tony knows the bomb can explode any time of the year, day or night. He is ready for it. Duck and cover. Atta boy, Tony. That flash means act fast. Tony knows that it helps to get to any kind of cover. This wall was close by, so that's where he ducked and covered. Tony knew what to do. Notice how he keeps from moving or from getting up and running? He stays down until he is sure the danger is over. The man helping Tony is a civil defense worker. His job is to help protect us when there is danger of the atomic bomb. We must obey the civil defense worker.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
But what should you do if a volcano erupts near you or your family? So what will you do when you hear a volcano erupting? That's right. Duck and cover. Looks like you got the idea. Duck and cover. Thank you and goodbye.
Look, the volcano! Quick, duck and cover!
So, in order to do this, we have to contextualize what the Cold War was. That's not the Cold War. This is the Cold War. And setting the stage and understanding just what was the setting for how the Cold War existed. Why did it come about? And so the first thing we're looking at is what we're going to call setting the stage. So this is the world in 1914, just prior to World War I. Britain owns the largest empire in the world, with France closely behind. Germany has a few colonies. Belgium has the Congo. So the world is colonized. We have the second wave of imperialism fully in force, and most of the global south, with the exception of Latin America, is under the control of a European power. And these powers have been fighting over it, over each other's territory, over each other resources. And as they're gearing up for more of that, World War I happens in terms of their conflict. After World War I, all of the colonies realized that they were needed by their empire just as much as they benefited from being part of their empire. Particularly, let's say India was like, wait, we can come back and we can get our independence because we helped the empire. They should see that we can rule ourselves if we can fight. And some of these places had negotiations, but it still wasn't right for that. World War II comes around, and with the Atlantic Charter, which was a statement issued August 14th, 1941, between the United States and Britain. And what it stated by the United States was that the United Kingdom will no longer add any more territory. It will make no territorial changes against the wishes of the people in which they reside. They restore self-government to those that are deprived of it, and reduction of trade restrictions, on trade without Great Britain or outside of Great Britain. They will then also look towards global cooperation to secure better economic and social conditions for all, freedom from fear and want to make sure everyone's needed, freedom of the seas, the abandonment of the use of force and disarmament of aggressor nations. So this was signed 1st January 1942 and was pretty much the standard for the UN Charter that will come about 3 years later. But it was this understanding that the empires need to dissolve and that they need to end. And that brings us to looking at gaining independence after World War II. This also comes about for this sentiment of anti-imperialism, that there's little support to maintain an empire, and most of these countries get their independence from France and Britain particularly. Other things going on, the United States promises independence for the Philippines in 1948, and then we have some governments restructuring after the Cold War, which changes things. One, the Eastern Bloc countries of Eastern Europe band together and form the Warsaw Pact with the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, in the United States, we are reestablishing and redefining how we organize our military, including formation of the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency, which is a civilian peacetime military intelligence agency. Or sorry, not military, but a non-military peacetime intelligence agency. The Department of Defense is created, and so that there's now departments of the Army and Navy and Air Force. The defeated nations are then restructured and rebuilt. Japan's goes to a republic again. West Germany becomes a democracy. East Germany becomes under a communism. And then the Soviet Union, of course, controlling most of the eastern countries that they conquered in defending or fighting against Hitler in World War II. So what this does, though, is it changes and reshapes a balance of power. First, the Allies that won World War II developed radar signals that could bounce off of its electromagnetic signal that can bounce off something and come back, and then you can triangulate the signal and find out exactly where ships are boats, planes, all kinds of things that are able to be detected, and estimate their velocity as well as their distance. Radio as well, wireless communications for the first time became widespread and able to be used. And then finally, though, the atomic bomb. The atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, two separate bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, were 15 kilotons and then 20 kilotons each.
It was just one plane, so I assumed that it was passing by as usual.
And I was counting. 1, 2, 3.
I was wiping the desktop. That was when the bomb was dropped.
It took about 45 seconds from the time the bomb left the airplane until it exploded. And I think there wasn't a man in the airplane that wasn't either timing it with his watch or counting or doing something. I was sure the bomb was a dud. I was sure it wasn't going to work.
After falling for 43 seconds, the time and barometric triggers started the firing mechanism. A uranium bullet fired down a barrel into a uranium target. Together, they started a nuclear chain reaction. Solid matter began to come apart, releasing untold quantities of energy.
As we get into this understanding of nuclear age, whether it be over power or electricity, I want to show you something.
We begin our story in the middle of downtown in a major city. People are going to work, studying for exams, are lost in their thoughts and daily lives. Right here, a nuclear weapon is detonated and time freezes. The first phase of the explosion happens within less than a second. In a millisecond, a ball of plasma hotter than the sun appears and grows in a fireball to more than 2 kilometers across. Within this ball, everyone is just gone. Think of water dripped onto a very hot pan. A sizzle, and then there's nothing. Most buildings, cars, trees, tacky sculptures, and people, all evaporated. First, the flash, an intense tsunami of light, washes over the city in an instant. If you happen to have your head pointed in the direction of the explosion, it renders you blind for a few hours. The heat of this light produces a thermal pulse, so energetic and hot that it just burns everything as far as 13 kilometers from the detonation site. What this means is that everything in an area of 500 square kilometers that is able to burn starts burning. Plastic, wood, fabric, hair, and skin. If you happen to be in reach of the thermal pulse, one moment you're on your way to work, the next moment you're on fire. Now the second phase begins. It happens in a few seconds. Most people will now first notice that something is wrong, but it's already too late for hundreds of thousands. The flash is followed by the shockwave. The heat and radiation of the fireball create a bubble of superheated and supercompressed air around it that's now expanding explosively. Faster than the speed of sound, creating winds stronger than hurricanes and tornadoes. Human infrastructure is no match for its power. Most major buildings within a kilometer of the fireball are just ground up down to their base. Only steel-reinforced concrete is able to partially resist the pressure. In the surrounding parks where retirees feed the ducks, trees blackened and smoldering from the heat a second before snap like toothpicks. If you're outside, you get tossed away like a grain of dust in a tornado. The shock wave weakens as it travels outwards, but still, about 175 square kilometers of houses collapse like they're made of cards, trapping tens of thousands of people who didn't have any time to react. Gas stations explode and fires spread throughout the rubble. A mushroom cloud made from the remains of the fireball, dust and ash rises kilometers into the sky in the next few minutes and casts a dark shadow over the ruined city. This violently pulls in fresh air surrounding the city, destroying more buildings and providing an abundance of oxygen. It depends on the city what happens next. If there's enough fuel, fires may turn into a firestorm that burns the rubble, everybody trapped in it, and people trying to flee the devastation. Up to 21 kilometers from the explosion, people just like you rush to their windows to take pictures of the mushroom cloud, unaware that the shockwave is still coming at them, about to shatter their windows and create a blizzard of sharp glass. The third phase begins in the coming hours and days. We're used to the idea that help will come, no matter the disaster. This time is different. A nuclear explosion is like every natural disaster at once. There are hundreds of thousands or millions of people with serious injuries, lacerations, broken bones, serious burns. In the next few minutes and hours, thousands more will die because of these injuries. Countless people are trapped in collapsed buildings like in earthquakes, or blinded by the flash, deaf from the blast wave, and unable to flee through streets impassable with rubble and debris. They're terrified, confused, and don't know what's happened to them or why. Most likely, many hospitals have been leveled along with all the other buildings, and most medical professionals are either dead or injured along with everyone else. The survivors lucky enough to have been in metro tunnels or standing in the right place to be unburned and unhurt won't have truly escaped harm yet. Depending on the type of weapon, where it explodes, and even the weather, an awful black rain can begin, with radioactive ash and dust descending on the city, covering everything and everyone. The invisible, malicious, silent horror of radiation takes its turn. Every breath carries poison to the lungs of the survivors. Over the coming days, the people who receive the highest doses of radiation exposure will die. There will be no help, not for hours or maybe even days. Civilization doesn't operate when there is a total breakdown of infrastructure.
Now, who made up the Cold War? In this case, there were two major powers. And in history, when we look overall in political science and international relations, this is called a dual hegemony. A hegemon is a sole ruler or leader of an area or region. In this case, the duality is the US versus the Soviet Union. And so the world was divided into two spheres. The United States becomes the democratic leader of the free world, and the Soviet Union vows for more, or practices a more authoritarian approach to their government. The idea here comes between the difference between communism and capitalism. And capitalism is, oversimplifying everything, is that there's free markets with consumers and producers that buy, sell services and goods at a mutually accepted price with limited or no government interference into those decision-making, into that decision-making. For communism, however, that the state owns the property as well as the means of production and the decisions behind that production. And so they decide what to sell. So in some cases, you had a single store that sold single items, like women's clothing. You would have skirts that are thick wool that went to your ankles, that could be in dark gray or blue or black. And the variety and differences were pretty limited through these countries because there was no incentive to really make a bunch of clothes that will sell that look fashionable because they're made as ordered by the government. And so the view that there is no real private property among its citizens was completely different to the US way of life, which 90% of the United States law is about who owns what. Is about private property rights. And so these two defining principles and differences is what causes 50 years of almost conflict. Now, there were other states, as you see here, that are in yellow, and these were called the non-aligned states. And they varied from whether or not they were actually non-aligned or whether they were just saying that and trying to present themselves as not really amongst the aligned. Like, for example, Cuba was in the non-aligned movement, even though they were very much allied to the Soviet Union. 75 to 80% of their trade went to the Soviet Union. So can't really say that. But there were others that led this movement. Particularly one was named as Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. And his idea was that we neither face east nor west, but we raced forward. And Sukarno in Indonesia also proposed to find their own way outside of the communism or capitalism Cold War conflict. What they wanted to do is have mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression to all non-aligned members, mutual non-interference in domestic affairs, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. So that was their kind of goal, to be outside of this Cold War rivalry. Now, what were the effects? There's a lot more on this one. There's a lot more. So the first one was there's a creation of new military alliances. One of them called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was second after the development of the Warsaw Pact. The countries here in red are the member states of the Warsaw Pact, particularly East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. All of these were conquered by the Soviet Union when the Germans were retreating during World War II, and the Soviets put in their own government. Yugoslavia was communist, but it wanted nothing to do with Stalin. In fact, Stalin tried several times to kill General Tito, and at one point Tito said, "Can you please stop sending assassins, or I'll send one, and that's all we'll need." So, but because of this, this alliance and these, it created what's called the Iron Curtain, that thick black line that divides these eastern and western countries. And this led to an arms race, particularly, especially for the development of nuclear warfare, weapons in higher demand capacity and bombs, but never to use them. They were there for threats that if you obliterate me, I will obliterate you, and that was called mutually assured destruction. And so this political cartoon is kind of making fun of that. Because if you notice, both of them have these huge weapons of war, and yet they only resort to shooting arrows, because using them means everyone dies. So some of the wars that occurred, first was the Korean War, where North Korea invades South Korea in 1950 and pushes forces all the way back to about 75 miles of the Sea of Japan, or East China Sea. U.S. then counterattacks and pushes forces all the way back, the North Vietnamese forces, all the way back to the Chinese border. And China claims that the United States crossed into China and therefore attacked China, and China invades, pushing the UN forces all the way back to the 38th parallel, where there was a armistice signed, which is an armistice is a ceasefire. So technically, we have not concluded a peace treaty with North Korea yet. So, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when the Soviet Union put missiles that could reach Washington, D.C., or were planning to install them in Cuba for that purpose. And we embargoed Cuba, which is an act of war. Eventually, after these 13 days, the Soviets did back down from their missile development, and a war was avoided that could have been worse. And it was probably the closest we got to a nuclear war.
You know, every great war produces its great hit songs. And after each war, we like to gather around the piano or the guitar and play these songs. We enjoy the songs because they remind us of how much we enjoyed the war. Now, World War III is almost upon us, as you know, by popular demand, it seems. And it occurred to me that if any songs are going to come out of World War III, we better start writing them now. so I have one here. This is a song that some of the boys will have sung to their mothers as they will have gone bravely off to World War III. There's one reference in here that I should explain. There is a reference to our leading television news commentators, Chet Huntley and David Brinkley. I feel that this is appropriate because, as you know, World War III will be the first World War to be seen on television. And I certainly hope that we all have color television by then. So long, Mom, I'm off to drop the bomb, so don't wait up for me. But while you swelter down there in your shelter, you can watch me on your TV. While we're attacking frontally, watch Brinkley and Huntley describing contrapuntally the cities we have lost. No need for you to miss a minute of the agonizing Holocaust. Yeah! Little Johnny Jones, he was a U.S. pilot, and no shrinking violet was he. He was mighty proud when World War III was declared. He wasn't scared, no siree. And this is what he said on his way to Armageddon. So long, Mom, I'm off to drop the bomb, so don't wait up for me. But though I may roam, I'll come back to my home, although it may be a pile of debris. Remember, Mommy, I'm off to get a commie, so send me a salami and try to smile somehow. I'll look for you when the war is over, an hour and a half from now.
Next up is the Vietnam War, when once again a country is promised to vote on whether they wanted to go independent or communist or capitalist. And the charismatic leader Ho Chi Minh was a communist, but mainly because no one else supported his push for independence against France. He fought against the Japanese in World War II, then he fought against the French until 1954, and led North Vietnam into its own independence, and eventually they invade and attack South Vietnam. The U.S. intervenes, imposes a draft, war bombings, more bombs were dropped in Vietnam than World War II. The power of our carpet bombing and campaigns there. And yet it failed due to a disconnect between our own government, our people who thought this war was wasteful and unnecessary, and really not having the military objective of what are we doing and how long are we going to be there and when do we win. So after not seeing much change and after some really nasty offensives by the North Vietnamese, the United States decides to pull out its troops in 1972, and then we fully evacuate in 1975, and the government falls, and Vietnam gets reunited into a communist country. Even though Vietnam is right next to China, they were more supported by the Russians because they do not have a good history with the Chinese. So the next major war is the Sudanese or Angolan Civil War. Angola is this country up here. Now, Angola gets its independence from Portugal as they fought an independence movement against Portugal, and Portugal then pulls out. Then the communist and anti-communist forces fight one another for control over Angola. In the process, a lot of the governments send weaponry, material support. South Africa supported by the United States and allies. Soviet Union and Cuba support the communist factions rather than the anti-communist factions. So Cuba actually gets directly involved and invades with its army. South Africa, too, invades with its army, and the conflict spills into both Zaire, present-day now Namibia, and Zambia as well. The war ends in 1989 with a democratically elected government, and South Africa actually gives independence to Namibia as well. So that was an example of another proxy war, is what these are all called. They're wars where one side is fighting another side, but is supported by one of the Cold War powers.